Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindset of a Champion, episode 6. Today, I am joined by JM Blakley. JM, welcome.
Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, man. So, how about we go ahead and start with you? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I did a little lifting back in the 90s and early 2000s. I was a bench press specialist. I had a few records at different weight classes. I think that possibly one of the most interesting things that I was able to accomplish was I was able to compete in different weight classes every year. So I would gain and then lose copious amounts of weight to compete in the 220, 242, 275, 308, and super heavy class. And one year, my earlier year, I did two meets at 198 too, but I really don't count them because I never got back to being down there. But I have lifts that are competitive in all of those classes, and I was competitive, top 5 in the world in all those classes every year. So that's something that I'm pretty proud of. I wanted to be a good bench presser, and then once I started challenging the records, I wanted to compete against everybody, not just people that weighed what I weigh. I find the weight class, my relationship with weight classes is that I like that it gets more people to get involved and they have a place to be involved. But, when we want to talk about the fastest racehorse or the strongest person, when we start putting qualifiers on it, the strongest person under 200 pounds, over 200 pounds, we don't do that with shot put. Whoever throws the ball the furthest is the best shot putter. And so I sort of wanted to take that approach. I just wanted to be the best. And so I tried to compete against everybody I could possibly compete against, no matter what they weighed. So I changed my body weight so that I could effectively do that. I wanted to be the best, and I didn't want to just be the best with the qualifier. So that was important to me to open that up. And so that was a lot of fun. I traveled all over the world, and I made friends all over the world, and it was a great experience.
Awesome. And certainly, I think most people watching this will know your exploits with regards to weight gain and weight loss. And it's interesting to hear some of the philosophy behind that, that rather than using it as a crutch to win a less competitive class, you did the complete opposite. You actually exploited it. You used it as a way to test yourself against the best in every way that you could, despite the limiting factors of the way the sport was structured, if I understand that right.
You do, Scott. And that brings up another idea that at some point, though, I learned the lesson of competing only against myself. And that's where the real competition is to best yourself. I forget who said it, and I'll probably butcher it, but the concept of the quote was, I'm not interested in besting anyone else. I'm interested in besting myself. And that's a paraphrase for sure. But it rings true. At some point, you forget about the others, and the real competition is how far can I go? So that's what happened when I set my first world record. I never thought that was possible for somebody like me. But when I got there, I thought I might have been done, right? I did something that nobody else could do. Everybody that tried had failed, and I did it. What more is there? Well, the answer to that is there's plenty more. There's one more pound for you. There's you trying to best yourself. And so what was there was a progression, and it was slow, but it was constant. I was constantly learning that the real reward and the real value wasn't in setting records and beating other people. It was in doing better than I ever thought I could, and then trying to do better than that, and then trying to do better than that. And so I was driven at some point by curiosity. I wanted to see where the end was. And it was a process. I thought I was done when I benched 500. I had no more aspirations. I thought that would be impossible for me. And I did it. And I realized I was curious. I wanted to see if I could go further. And curiosity is a big driver. And I used to say that I was curious to see what the limits of human capacity were. You know, how far can anybody take it? And the thing is, with a additive sport like powerlifting, weightlifting, it's different than subtractive sports, where if you run the 100 meters, you keep subtracting time off. But there is a physical, meaning in the terms of physics of the universe, limit to how fast you can run 100 meters. Nobody will ever run it in 0 time. We can keep chipping away little bits, 10 seconds, 9 seconds. Somebody will break 9 seconds. But there's a limit. That will stop. Nobody can get from point A to point B that's 100 meters away in no time. It can't get down to 0. It has a stopping point. But adding weight doesn't. Somebody will lift 1,000 pounds, and then someone will lift 1,001 pounds, and then 1,002. And there may be an end point to what humans are capable of before their bones break, but there's no physical, as in terms of the laws of physics, limit. It can keep going. And so you get curious about that.
Right.
How far can I take it?
No, that's actually phenomenally interesting, because it's almost as if the process of lifting weights in this context, or additive sports as you described them, they act as a catalyst for belief. It asks you to test what you can visualize, what you can imagine being possible. Like a good example of that, I think, in strength sport was the 1,000-pound barrier on the deadlift. You know, no one believed it was physically possible. Once Andy Bolton deadlifted it, then 20 guys deadlifted, and now it's considered an incredible feat, but it's considered not close to the current world record. Soon, I would imagine 20 years, 500 kilos even will follow a similar path. But as you describe it, it gives you an opportunity to be curious about what you can envision yourself or someone else doing.
Yeah, the same was true for Roger Bannister in the 4-minute mile. A lot of people were close. It was said to be impossible by people that don't have a great imagination, I guess. And he did it, and then the floodgates opened. Several athletes, a handful, flooded through that gate once he broke it, just like the 1,000-pound barrier. So things like that are they're interesting to me because of what you said about our belief. Where is our belief? And that's a really big component to doing things at a very high level, especially when you're out there by yourself and nobody else has led the way. All the way up to that point, there's a path. And I followed that path. I did what other people did. There's a structure, and there's a known way to get there. People have gone there before. And for almost everything we do in our lives, almost every achievement, somebody has someone has blazed the trail. They went and found a way. I've gotten interested in rock climbing, not for myself, but just as athletes. And they have to find paths up rocks, and these paths become routes that become followed by other climbers. And it's the same way with most of our life. We can follow the route, we can follow the path, we can follow the structure, and only when you get to the higher ends of that do you start having to find your own way. And that's a really creative place to be. So two things that I'm really big on in my life are creativity and curiosity. So your curiosity, if it's strong enough, there's a place in the brain they call the causal operator. It says, how did this happen? And some people have a highly active causal operator and some people don't. You know, if you found a shoe on the top of your car when you went out to drive to work or something, some people would say, how did this shoe get here? You know, how did this happen? Why is it here? Is this a joke? They would start to wonder and be curious about that unusual event. And some people would just brush the shoe away and go to work. And they don't have a lot of curiosity. They don't have a lot of, and those people, I don't know the correlation, but I have the tendency to believe they might be a little lower on the creative end. I don't know that for a fact, but it stands to reason to me with what I do know. That would be something I should look up. But people that have high curiosity, the causal operators, are always wondering. I wonder how this happens. I wonder, when I was a little kid, I destroyed all my toys because I wanted to see what was inside of them. And so I'd play with them for a little bit, but then I couldn't help myself. I would open them up and tear them apart to see what was inside. Were there springs? What was going on in there? How is it put together? What holds it together? How come this can move like it moves? And that curiosity has led, if you want to find out what's behind that curtain, that's a phrase I use a lot. What is behind that curtain? You have to find a way. You have to create a way to open that curtain. How are you going to get to the curtain, and how are you going to get that door open? How are you going to see what's behind the veil? And that's where a lot of creativity comes from. And those two things, I have decided in my worldview, those two things, curiosity and creativity, are what enrich someone's life. They have mine. I can say that unequivocally. They have enriched my life. The more curious and the more creative, especially the creative, bringing something into the world that did not exist before you applied your creativity, curiosity, and willpower and effort to it. That's about the highest form of intelligence there is. Making new shit, making new stuff, bringing something that never existed into existence, a song, a poem, something with your body, your biceps bigger, bringing children into the world, making something new. That's a pretty powerful way to live. It's to me, my worldview. I've decided that's the richest way to live.
Honestly, and if I could, like, just to weigh in on that topic, because to me personally as well, and especially in my work, and in psychoanalysis in general, I think the concept of curiosity is the single most significant catalyst for change. And I couldn't agree more. The way I've always imagined it myself is, if you imagine a coin, right? You have curiosity on one side, and you always have fear on the other. So if we use your analogy of the curtain, when one is going to pull back the curtain, or if one is even aware that the curtain is there, there will be that coin and the fear of what's behind the curtain, or even recognizing that the curtain is present and that there could be a curtain in your otherwise unassuming existence, right? A lot of people would turn and run. Whereas when the curiosity side of the coin is present, that is when you open the curtain and potentially step through the archway beyond, right? And that's where change happens. If we imagine that as a macrocosm for emotional material, right? The change, the curiosity is the awareness and the addressing of something that you didn't think existed before, if you understand me. So that is a very important concept, and I think and a fantastic insight.
I use that analogy. I say it a little differently. I talk about how to erase fear. And one of the tools for erasing fear is curiosity. And so that's your coin analogy. You know, one side or the other. When you flip one side over, you can't see the opposite side. It goes away.
Right.
And so it's a similar concept for me. If I operate from fear, you can do that. You can fear doesn't always cause paralysis or negation of action, but it sure makes it a lot harder. It doesn't impel one to act. It's harder to act when you're operating from fear, from that side of the coin, than if you flip that over. You can't see the fear because all you can see is, I want to know, I want to find out, I'm interested, I'm so interested, I'm going to take this risk. I may open this door and I may get run over by a freight train coming out of it, or I'm going to look in that tunnel and I might get run over by a freight train, but I can't stop myself. I want to see. And then your fear is overcome by the curiosity. It's outweighed.
And there's sorry to interrupt you there, but there's also a benevolence to the curiosity. If we, especially when we counteract it with an emotion like fear, it's childlike, it's intuitive, and there is that feeling of growth that comes from it. Even if it's a surprise you may not like on the other end, you can, as the child version of you did, you can say, well, I know what my toy's made of now. You've grown, you've learned something, right? So it's interesting that you use the example of yourself as a child, because I do associate curiosity with that basic childlike kind of animal instinct that human beings have to explore their world and to make sense of it, right?
Yes. And unfortunately, I've been employed as a teacher at the college level and in the high school and a little tiny bit at the middle school level, but we beat that out of them. We beat that curiosity right out of them. We want obedience. We want conformity. We value those things. And we're in a society where at about 13 years old, kids will do just about anything to fit in, even things that are not self-serving. They're not in their best interest. They'll do things to gain social status and fit in, because you gain social status by fitting in. And following your own curiosity is not something that is very valued in life anymore. We beat that curiosity out, and there's a reason for that. People are much easier to control if they're not all thinking for themselves. They're not all curious. If I give you the answers, there's nothing for you to be curious about. The end of questioning and curiosity is an answer. Answers are not nearly as valuable as more questions. And there is always another question we could ask. Where do you go when you die? You go to heaven. Done. Finished. End of discussion. But I have a few questions about what heaven might be like. I have a few. We've set up a society to provide answers. Boom, boom. When you ask somebody on the street, how are you doing? The correct social contract response is, I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine. Done. There's no real curiosity there. I don't really care how you're doing. I'm just saying hello. I'm just being cordial. But if we actually answered, what would happen, right? You don't really want to know all about how, or if you have kids and they come home from a date and you say, how did it go? You don't really want all the answers, because your kids might have been up to some things that you are reticent to accept. And so there's this dulling down of curiosity that is systematic, and it is not on accident. It is on purpose, because it makes life go faster and smoother, and it gives them, you know, the man, the people, it gives them more control. And we seed that to them for comfort of operation. And so we have a system in this country where we send kids to school now, and we don't teach them how to think at all. We teach them what the answer is going to be, and then when they see that question again on the test, they know the answer. My dog's chasing my cat over there. They may come barreling through here in a second. Who knows? And that's a shame, because, you know, we tell them, what's the largest rodent in the world? Well, it's a tapir. All right. So they get the question on the test and they say it's a tapir, and they don't know what a tapir is. They don't know how big it or small it is. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know anything about a tapir, except that when asked the question, what's the biggest rodent in the world? The answer is a tapir. It's just words. There's no understanding behind the words. And that's how we teach. And so there's a whole bunch of people in this country that think they're pretty smart because they got really good grades, but they can't think for themselves. And so when they are presented with two conflicting pieces of information, they desperately look for someone to tell them what the answer is. Because if you tell me what the answer is, I'll give you the right answer. That's what I've been doing my whole life. In school, in my job, in my social interactions. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? I know all the right answers, but what happens when I don't have the answer? And I have two pieces of conflicting information. Now I'm desperate for somebody to lead me, to tell me what to do. And man, that's exactly what they wanted the whole time. We have designed this system, and I've watched it happen. Because when I went to school, they taught us how to think for ourselves. I went to school in the 70s. They wanted us to be different and to be unique and that bring our own flavor to things. That's gone. And I see it all around me. And I see it in weightlifting. People want a program from me. They want me to give them sets and reps, percentages. They want this structure. They want the answer. They don't want to learn to train instinctively or intuitively. They don't want to learn the process of feeling your body and sensing the rep before you have an injury. Everybody stops the rep after they have an injury. The trick is to stop the rep before you have the injury. You can't do that with just giving the answer in the gym all the time. So I see it everywhere now. I see it plain as day, and it's a problem because it's led in this country for us to have some really piss poor leaders, and that goes from the people around my little area that I live in all the way up to our people in Washington. They're terrible at leading, and I know a little bit about leading because I was a coach. And there's no difference between running a company and leading a company or a business and coaching kids or adults on a field. It's the same principles. And we have terrible leaders. They don't know how to lead at all. They just give people the answers and that has got us into a lot of trouble. We got a lot of problems with our debt and our deficit. and our health, our public health system is on the verge of collapse. And we've lost more people than any country in the world due to this little tiny health crisis that we couldn't figure out how to lead people through. And we were so bad at it. We have 4.5% of the world's population and 26% of the deaths from the COVID-19 thing. That's not symmetrical. There's a leadership problem there.
So if I could jump in there, there are a few things that I want to ask you and comment on. Firstly, when you spoke about leadership and curiosity, and it seems as if from listening to you speak, these are qualities that are quite innate to you as an individual anyway. But you
taught them though too. But go ahead.
You found yourself in an incredibly competitive environment in the 90s when you were lifting professionally, in which the philosophy that you described earlier, you being training for yourself and hitting, putting another pound on your bar, it seemed to be diametrically opposed to the mindset of a lot of the people around you, which was to be the best and beat everyone. How did you find yourself coming to that conclusion in the environment that you were surrounded by?
I beat everybody. So it was a natural. So I all the things that I made about every mistake you could make. So I know a lot about doing things the wrong way. And you can learn a lot from doing things the wrong way. If you walk into a room and put your hand on a hot stove, I'm going to walk in after you. And I have learned a lot from your mistake. You can learn a lot by doing things wrong, and you can learn a lot by observing others do things wrong. When we're in the gym and I'm with the trainee and somebody across the gym is doing poor form, I always have my trainees stop what we're doing and say, what do you see over there? Do you see what they're doing wrong? Do you see how they should be doing it? Do you see the juxtaposition between right and wrong? And you can learn a lot that way. And sometimes I will teach a trainee how to do something, and then I'll teach them the right way. And then consciously tell them to do it wrong and feel what that feels like, so that they can compare right and wrong, what they feel like. And so I did a lot of things wrong, and I definitely was caught up in, and I remember thinking to myself, man, I was going for a record, and instead of going for my personal record, there was an artificial false raising of the world record from 7:05, which we were all trying to get, to 7:34. And the guy that was supposedly lifted it did not lift it. And it was given to him as a gift. And it was a tragedy, because all of us that were going for that 7:05, all of a sudden, we had to try to go for 30 more pounds. Now, there's a difference between going from 550 to 555 and going from 650 to 655. That 5 pounds is different. It's just 5 pounds, and it's a smaller percentage of the whole, but it's a lot harder to get. And so throwing an extra 30 on top of something. So I chased that record. And my best at the time that I started chasing the record, I had gotten 710, but it wasn't a record at that time. And that was my best. And instead of going to 715, and this is what I had done the whole time, 550, 555, 560, 565, personal records. And instead of focusing on that, I got that 735, because it was kilos for 734. And I had that 735 goal. And I wasted 6 competitions, 6 meets, taking an opener and then going right to like 690, 685, 695, take an opener and then go right to 735. and I had 2 chances at it. And I missed it over and over 6 times. 6 meets, I got my opener and then failed at 7:35. So close. A couple meets, I locked out one arm and not the other. But so I kept thinking, I can do this. I can do it. But I should have done looking back, a better choice for me would have been to not make that mistake and to just follow 7:15, 7:20, 7:25. And eventually I would have gotten there. But I got caught up in that mistake of being competitive against others and not against myself.
Right.
And so by wasting the better part of a year and putting my body through and taking a lot of meets in quick succession, I changed and I went the other direction, and I started to build it up again. And it really it was a good lesson. It may have prematurely shortened my career because it was a lot on the joints, but I had to learn it that way. And I had already figured out that I shouldn't be competing against others. That's how I got to 700. I had already figured out the way to do this was to not, and I got caught up in it too. So anybody can fall prey to that thinking, but it's still false thinking. It's still a bad way to compete. The best way to compete is to try to outdo whatever you just did.
Right.
And so, you know, I can honestly say that I learned it the hard way, but I had already learned it, and I still had to relearn it because I got caught in that. All of us were mad that all of us that were in that over 700 looking for 705, that next step, you know, we all felt cheated, and we were all cheated by that. But it got me caught up in not doing the right thing, not looking inward at myself, concentrating outward, and what a waste of energy it ended up being.
I think now that actually makes so much more sense with regards to how you remain competitive and you kind of reconcile those two things. It's not that in the absence of looking outside, you know, you are therefore not competitive. You are actually more capable of making optimal decisions with regards to your own performance because you are making incremental progress, beating the man, which is you. And then in turn, because of that momentum you create, you beat your competitors and you waste no external energy on worrying and forecasting what they may or may not do, because you are in control of the only thing you can be in control of, which is your direction of intensity, if I understand that right.
Yes, just me. The truth is, Scott, in this sport, it's not like you're on a wrestling mat and you got your hands on your opponent. My opponents weren't even on the platform when it was my turn to do my thing. They weren't even there. That's how individual this sport really is. You don't get to beat anybody. You get to do your best. Other people get to do their best. You're not even on the platform at the same time. And then at the end of the day, you see whose best was better than you compare bests is what you do. That's not the same way we vision competition. You're not on a soccer pitch and you have to outplay the people that day, that moment by moment. You're not in an arm wrestling match where you have to, you're so individualized and separate in this sport. You get your chance. But who's there? Just you and the weight. That's it. That's it. And so that's what you can control. You can control the weeks up to training, your peak, and then your performance. You have to be at your best when the best is needed. But you have absolutely no control over what someone else does when they get their turn all alone and you're not on the platform. You can't run up there and push the bar down, you know?
Right.
And they do that to you. You're all alone when you compete in this sport. And so by realizing the truth of that, the honesty of that, the proximity of that competition, it goes inside. It goes so close. You have it out there. You're looking outside yourself at others, and I have to beat that guy, and I have to beat that guy, and who's going to show up at the meet, and who am I going to have to beat? And it starts to move closer and closer the wiser you get. And at some point, it goes inside. It's just you. And that's what's going on for real.
Right.
That's the actual physical reality of the meet. You're on the platform with the weight. And the weight isn't even something to beat. It's apathetic. It's just gravity. The weight weighs the same and pulls down to the earth, whether you're under it or not. It's not against you. It's not trying to stop you. It's certainly not for you. It's not part of the equation. The entire competition moves in proximity closer and closer. And if you do it right, it moves off the weight. It's not you against the weight. I use that analogy a lot because people understand it. But the truth is, the weight's not trying to stop you from lifting it. It weighs the same in a deadlift on the floor as it does with you holding it standing up erect. It doesn't change. It's not part of the, you have to use it to accomplish your thing. The best that I've ever heard this put was by Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary, first two guys to summit Everest. And they asked Sir Edmund Hillary, the Englishman, what it was like to do it. And he talked about the every step he had to conquer the mountain. He had to attack the summit. He was in a competition with the mountain, and he was going to beat the mountain. And that's how he talked about it. I will be victorious. I will overcome the resistance. I will climb and make. And they asked Tenzing Norgay, the Tibetan Sherpa that went with him, what it was like. And he said something like, the mountain and I made the climb. Every step I took, the mountain pushed me higher. We did it together. There was this complete and totally different mindset of doing the exact same thing, climbing up to the top of Mount Everest. But one person had externalized and vilified the inert mountain, and the other one had sort of befriended it. The mountain allowed me to make the climb. If the mountain wasn't there, I couldn't get any higher. And so that's the weight is just there for you to demonstrate who you are and what you can do. It's not trying to stop you, or it's not trying to help you. It is neutral. It is utterly neutral.
No,
it gives you an opportunity to show people what you can do. That's all it is.
That is absolutely, I love that example, especially with regards to the perspective of the inert mountain, the thing that is objective. It's a force of nature. It exists outside of the realm of human understanding. The mountain is there and will be there until time itself erodes it out of existence. And I think with regards to weightlifting, just look at the perspective of different communities within weightlift or within this, training culture and what the weights mean to them. If you ask a bodybuilder what a weight is, the bodybuilder often replies with, the weight is the I am the artist, and the weight is my paintbrush that helps me sculpt my physique, right? They see it as an act of creation, of building. You ask a powerlifter, and oftentimes it's the vilification. The weight is my enemy. It's us versus the weight. You can go a little bit further out and you look at something like Basque stone lifting, which is a very cultural practice. They see the stone as something sacred, something spiritual. You have a relationship with the stone. It becomes part of your body to lift it, right? And in the end of the day, as you say, there are three inanimate objects that will be 250 pounds as long as we're still on Earth, any point in this on this planet for any purpose, right? But the attachment is what makes the reality. And in turn, how your conditioning and your perception of that attachment affects how you approach the challenge.
Yes. And it can be useful, especially for kids sometimes, because they're not anywhere near their potential. They're not trying to wring out a few extra microjoules of energy. They're just uncovering what they can already do. And so sometimes for them, I wouldn't throw away the adversity tool and mindset completely, but it misses the point in a big way, and it moves the activity outside of yourself, and it gives way too much weight to the iron. It gives it too much value. The value should be on you and what you can do and who you are and what you have prepared yourself to do. And the reward, because I've done it both ways, so I can speak for myself, and I know that the reward is greater when I am internally focused. And it may not be for everybody. You know, some people may thrive on domination. You know, I dominated the mountain. I dominated the weight. I dominated my opponent. And that may be, but I think that is much weaker. I think it's much more frail than something that nobody can touch and nobody can get to. It's completely inside you. That's much more valuable to me, because I've had both. I've done it both ways. And I'm not saying that you can't do great things with that mindset. But what I will offer is that mindset became less and less useful as I got higher and higher and higher, and had to go beyond what I thought my potential was. Not just uncovering the potential I have and seeing what potential I have and using all of my potential, but having run out of potential, having to go beyond. That's when that becomes more and more and more useful. That shift in proximity of the action and the event and the challenge. And
would you say that there was an energy equation associated with those things, in the sense that you took as you grew up, you further and further through the sport, that style of approach became less effective? Was that because it cost you more to expel that kind of domination energy, versus a more internalized approach, that there was actually a cost to it? Or simply was it something that you grew out of or shifted?
I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Maybe it does cost less to have it inside more. I don't know, but that wasn't the driver. The driver was usefulness.
Okay.
You know, when you're past your limit and you have to find a way to believe in yourself still, it's great to find out what you can do. And on the way, you're very proud of realizing what was in you all along, sort of, you know. That's a very enriching and empowering circumstance to go through. But there's a point where you're beyond belief. You're doing things that it's hard for you to believe you could do. This gets into some, and I came up against this at 600. Do I deserve to be this guy? I was the first guy in Ohio to bench press 600. And, I'm from a place where the West Side Barbell Club is. And so it was hard for me to believe I deserved to be the guy that could do it. Because once you do it, you have to live up to it. And that's a responsibility. And so I had a self-sabotaging, or I had a self-doubt episode that was pretty strong in my life to break 600. And I got over it and I figured out how to do it. And then I didn't have that ever again. I didn't have that at 700. I didn't have that situation anymore. But that's a real thing, to feel like you deserve, and getting to the point where you think you've used up all the potential you were born with. That I used to say that I am forcing my genetics now. I'm beyond what I was built to do. I'm doing what I want to do now. People say I'm doing the thing I was put on this earth to do, and that's great. I went beyond that. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do in life. I'm doing what I want to do now. I'm sort of cheating the universe now. I'm going beyond what the universe said I was supposed to do. And I don't know the veracity of that, but I know the mindset of that is pretty empowering. And that's when that shift became important. Once I had uncovered and got all the blood out of the stone that I could, I had to find a way to find more. And that's when that shift of turning inside became incredibly valuable. And if I have to believe that if I had figured it out sooner, I would have ultimately gone further. But it certainly would have made the experience different. I don't think I would change any of my experience. It's all valuable to me. But I could have done, like I told you, with learning about the hot stove. I would have gladly traded some of the hard lessons for easier lessons. And we don't get that necessarily in life. I didn't have somebody like me telling me what to do and what to look out for and what to how to reframe things like this. I wish I had. But having the dearth of that in my life, I want to become that for other people. I want to be the guy that says, if you do this, it's going to change things for you. And because I would have liked that in my career. I would have liked to had somebody say that to me and teach me about this, about shifting the focus inward and shifting the battle inward. It's me against me. It's me against my doubt. It's me against my lack of belief. It's me against my worthiness and not feeling like I deserve to have these extra high achievements. Those are hard things to get by for some people. And they were for me. And I think that the way that I got by it was by shifting, getting rid of the outside and focusing on the inside challenge. It became private, it became personal, and it became very richly rewarding. I mean, I can honestly tell you that there were training days where I had more pride and sense of accomplishment and achievement than the subsequent meets that I went to, where I demonstrated the strength I had built. The meets were a chance to demonstrate. The trainings were a place to build. And there was a lot of reward in the daily grind. And I think a lot of power lifters don't get much reward from the daily grind. They get the reward from the meat, and that's fine. But man, the meats are few and far between. Training is almost daily. If you can learn to suck meaning and reward out of your daily grind, then you don't have to wait so long, and they're not so sparse. Those meats and those rewards you get at the meat. If you only feel reward at the point of achievement, that's not enough for me. I want more reward in my life. And I know a lot of people that stave off that sense of accomplishment and reward until they achieve X, Y, or Z. When I get my goal, then I'll be happy with myself. I learned to be happy with myself every step I took towards the goal.
Because you became more process orientated than outcome orientated, right? The fact that the process itself is the day-to-day reward. And I think from everything that you've said throughout this episode, that is a phenomenal kind of overarching theme, is that both with regards to training itself, the physical work, and the inner work, the process, the day-to-day struggle, the day-to-day exaltation, the excitement, the challenge, the curiosity is where you thrive, right? And it's not simply a question of peeling back that lens and looking behind and seeing what's there and having an answer, but enjoying the excitement of approaching it, of thinking what could be behind there. And once you have an answer to the question, to then ask the next question, right? And it reminds me actually of a story that I heard from a bodybuilder in the 70s called John Defendis, who was well known for his training intensity. And I think he finally won the Mr. Universe after however many years of killing himself in the gym. And his response to winning the Mr. Universe, which at the time was the be-all end-all of his life, was, man, I just wish I could train. Because the battle, the gauntlet of training, of pushing yourself, of doing what you did and getting beyond where you thought you could be and thriving in this unknown state of growth, was so much more rewarding than that stepping on the stage and receiving the trophy at the end. And the epiphany he came to is the same as what you've described so far, which was that it was never about the trophy. It was about the journey, right? It was about the process and being the man in the arena, ultimately.
Yeah, I think there's an importance to being a good competitor and being able to perform, like I said before, being at your best when the best is needed, and that's important to do. But there was a lot of anticlimactic, meet days where, I did this. I would do the mental training of visualization, and I must have lifted 700 pounds mentally at least 1,000 times before I did it physically. And every time I lifted it, it was a perfect lift, and it was always a victory. It never ended up in a failure to lift it. And so when I actually did it, it felt like I had done it 1,000 times, because mentally I had. And there's a point in your training when you become assured that you can do this. At some point, I don't think anybody's necessarily surprised on game day. Not in weightlifting. You know how strong you are or are not. It's just up to you to execute.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to be I know people that believe they're going to get somehow magically psyched up extra. And at the meet, someone's going to slap them in the face. And they're going to get so mad. They're going to fly into a rage. And they're going to have this, you know, surge of adrenaline. And that's going to make them do something they're not trained to do. And that doesn't really happen too often. You do what you train to do. And so you've done your training, you know the numbers. And at some point in your training, you know you can do that lift. You know it. You know that you're ready to do it. If you're an advanced lifter, you know what comes before successful attempts, and you know what comes before unsuccessful attempts. And so if you're keeping good, accurate records, you show up to the meet and you put on the bar what you know you can do. Now, sometimes you're allowed an attempt that you can try for something interesting and new, because you made your goal lift on the second attempt, and you have that third attempt to sort of, I wonder if I can do this or that, and you don't know that you've trained for it. But that's different than having a goal and lifting the goal. It's sort of a fun, let's see what can happen here. But that's different than, because you don't have that as a goal and train for that. You have your number that you've trained for. And at some point in your training, you understand, I can do this. And so when you do, a little anticlimactic. If you put a number on that bar on that third lift, that you're like, hey, I made the lift I came to do. I knew I could. Now let's put something on there. And you make that one, that might be that experience of, holy shit, right? But setting a goal like 400, 500, 600, 700, you know, whatever it is, when you have that goal and you work very, very, very hard and very, very, very long for it, and you've paid attention, it's no surprise.
Right. It's almost, as you say, you've lived the moment in your own mind. And when it comes down to the punch, it's simply executing the movement as you practice, which as you say, and that's I think an important distinction as well, especially in comparison to sports like bodybuilding or things where there isn't a performance element. There is that execution that needs to be practiced and honed, and that intuitiveness that you described learning earlier as being integral to the progression of a lifter, knowing what it feels like to be as strong as you need to be, knowing when something isn't going the way you want it to go, knowing when an injury is imminent a rep before it happens rather than the rep after, right? Like you described. Unfortunately, as we're now closing in on the end of time today, is there any last message that you'd like to leave to those watching, potentially aspiring lifters, that you feel epitomizes your philosophy that you want to teach?
Yeah, I would say, and I do tell people this, champions are built from the inside out. That's something I say all the time. And every time I get to direct somebody to building their inside as much as they're spending time and energy building the outside, I really stress this, that if you believe that there is a mental component to your sport, you can put it into a percentage. Maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 80-20, maybe it's 90-10. If you believe there is a mental component as well as a physical component, and you are putting all of your time, 100% of your time and energy into only the physical component, and you're not doing exercises and drills and things to improve the mental side, then you're leaving a lot, let's just say half of the equation untouched. You're leaving that up to fate and chance and hope. And those aren't strategies. You know, That's just ignoring something that you know is a part of, even if you said it's only 10% mental, then you should be doing 10% of your training in your head. And there are drills. And I don't mean just having a positive attitude, because you can tell people, have a positive attitude, and they don't know how to do that. You have to teach them how to build a positive attitude. You can tell somebody, believe in yourself. You got to believe in yourself. And I'll be like, yes, I do, coach. How do I start doing that? And the coach, I don't know, just do it. And that's not an answer. That's not coaching. That's not exercises to build confidence and belief in oneself. So you have to do the work. You can't just say, yeah, I'm going to keep a positive attitude. I'm going to believe in myself. That's like telling a guy that's totally stressed out, you got to calm down. Yeah, I know. How do I do that, doctor? How do I calm down? What are the techniques? What are the methods? Give me. And that's what you gotta decide for yourself what your worldview is on the mental and the physical and how they fit together. And is one bigger than the other? Fine. But that's exactly how your training time and energy should be split. Whatever your belief is, I believe that the mental aspect is larger than the physical aspect. Some people disagree with that, and that's fine. But I spent more time mental training than I did physical training. At the end, about a 6-to-1 ratio. I spent six times as much energy and time on what was going on in my head, and I'll also expand that to what's going on in my heart, than I did in the gym with the weights. And so that's the final thing.
Wow. I really appreciate having you on. I think that was absolutely phenomenal. And honestly, that last phrase, to master one's training from the inside and out, and to really give that credence and create awareness and understand what that means for you as an individual. And as you've described, to not necessarily live in isolation, to take that to a coach and someone who understands it and can offer you guidance. So with that in mind, everyone who has listened to this thus far, I highly recommend that you check out both JM's Elite FTS articles and his own Instagram page, where there are a lot of posts to the effect of what we've been discussing today. And thank you everyone for watching.
I'm sorry, I spoke over you. Is it okay if I mention those addresses?
I will put them in the video link description when we post this.
I also have a YouTube channel, and I also offer online training. And someone that might be interested in working with me could get a hold of me through instant messaging on or direct messaging on Instagram. Awesome.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. And JM, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thank you, Scott.
All righty. Take care, everyone.